Hello, everyone, and welcome to the June Student Speakers Meeting of the Global Health Youth Organization. My name is Nuraldeen, and I am a co-founder of the organization, and we want to thank everyone for joining the meeting and working around any scheduling or time zone issues that you might have had. As for the format of today's meeting, we will begin with a quick introduction of each speaker, followed by the presentation for about 15 minutes. And after the presentations, we will post an attendance certificate in the chat. And we ask that all members stay muted throughout the presentation so that we can limit interruptions and distractions. Please feel free to add any questions or comments that may arise in the Zoom chat, and I'll now be passing it over to Mark, one of the directors of the organization, to introduce today's first speaker.
Thanks, Noor. So to start, we'd like to quickly provide an introduction for our first presenter, Adam. Adam's a rising senior, and he's hoping to pursue a career in medicine. He loves to volunteer, mountain bike, and play soccer. He's very interested in studying the potential of new developments within the field of orthopedics and how that realm could be revolutionized with new developments and improving patient recovery. With that being said, I'm now going to hand it over to Adam for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll be presenting my slides. Give me one moment. There we go. Okay, so today I'll be discussing the emergence of robotic-assisted surgery in orthopedic medicine, just because that's something I see that has so much potential for the future within global health as an entire unit as itself, and within medicine as its whole, and of course orthopedic medicine because it's directly connected with that. So I'll just begin talking about myself for just a little bit. So my name's Adam, like Mark just said, and I'm a rising student at RHS, Redlands High School, which is based in Southern California. It's at a city that's very close to UC Riverside, if anybody here is familiar with that school. And I currently serve on a variety of executive boards, along with engaging in 2 research labs and 1 coming up later this fall. So some hobbies I partake in are playing soccer and basketball and mountain biking. And I recently got into scuba diving last week. So I'll just begin talking briefly about orthopedics and it's everything within it. So everybody can know exactly what this entails. So orthopedics is a branch of medicine that's concerned with the intersections of the musculoskeletal system. So this is the part of the body that is, like your joints and parts like that. So while an extremely prominent medicinal pathway, has a lot of people going and flocking to it, primarily due to its income and its many sophisticated tools that it has various issues that are particularly in areas devoid of any surgical level hospitals, given its long requiring schooling and particular specific set of skills. So orthopedics, it uses a variety of tools and it uses a variety of machines, like in this picture above, but it's very, very difficult to come up and finally get people to join because of its it has a unique set of skills that nobody can really replicate. It's only a 1 out of 100 in a certain class of medicine. So new technological developments like Mako and the Da Vinci robotic surgeons are slowly gaining prominence due to their precision and their level of safety. So these machines, like in this picture above right here, so they kind of curtail and all of the requirements as before. Because before there has to be a lot of surgeons to deal with a joint problem. But with using those machines, you don't really need the people there. You only need certain people just to operate those machines. And those people don't have the amount of pain required to just go on through that surgery for 4 or 5 hours. It's much quicker with Mako and Da Vinci robotic systems. So let's go here. Yep. So here's the pros and cons of the robotic assisted surgery. I set it up like that just so everybody could see why some people may not go to robotic surgery. So, pros, it's more accurate. The results are a lot more reliable and recovery times are slashed. So with recovery times, it's because the accuracy and the reliability of the results, there's less trauma than before, and there's less time spent in recovery wing of a hospital, which, of course, is so important for areas like in Southern Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa, where there's not a lot of hospital beds that are, necessary for other patients. So it frees those up. And there's, of course, a quicker return to work or school. And there's, because of the less trauma, there's less discomfort, and, there's a higher quality of life. However, this is the cons of why this robotic surgery isn't prevalent everywhere. So it's very, very new. And with that being said, it's much more expensive, often 26% more expensive for patients and much, much more expensive for hospitals, which is troubling for patients who are less wealthy. This is especially a problem in areas like sub-Saharan Africa, which is why they can't afford those systems right now. So it requires more visits on average due to increased number of imaging. So there's not a lot of people spending time in the hospital wing recovering, but you have to be there prior just because there's a lot more imaging, more x-rays, more CT scans, stuff like that. And it still requires surgeons to operate. However, it's less intensive, like I said earlier. And it's difficult to learn because it's nothing like traditional surgical techniques. People can't learn, prior textbooks. They have to learn from new experiences. That's not like everywhere. So with global health, let's talk about this impact. So right now in the status quo, robotic-assisted surgery does have many drawbacks for peripheral countries, like in sub-Saharan Africa and areas like in Latin America. The benefits do not occur right now, but as research and development grows, and the potential for those grows just because of its accuracy and reliability, because it doesn't require as many surgeons, it doesn't require as many people to operate, and it's much quicker and more reliable. And because of its safety implications, right now, it may not have the necessary amount of surgeons, but in the future, when safety increases, there won't be as many surgeons necessary. So it is important to designate more money to the research. Since over the past 10 years, robotics has exponentially improved given the growth of technological industry. So if you look at tech, like phones, for example, of course, it grew massively over from 2010 to now, where we didn't have stuff like Face ID and stuff like that. But now, we have that stuff. Just like that, robotics has grown exponentially. 10 years ago, there weren't systems like this. The Da Vinci system and the Mako system weren't there, but now they are. So this can assist areas with little to no surgeons because of how quickly they turn over in hospitals or surgical clinics because of the implementation of those technologies. So right now, there isn't as much turnover, but with the implication of those systems, there's going to be quicker and quicker turnover, which is especially prevalent in areas in sub-Saharan Africa. So as a conclusion, there's still much to discover and unravel about the robotic-assisted surgical tools, like, those, because however, their potential is unparalleled, especially in underserved areas, because those areas, of course, they don't need as many surgeons, and it could be much, much quicker, with the turnover rate. And this new technology, especially within replication and development of the tools, as development cost decreases, because the overall surgical cost decreases. So right now, surgical costs have always stayed about the same, within, excluding inflation. But with those systems, if we could implement those systems effectively and safely, we could curtail that value and we could quickly cut that value in half because of how quickly we don't need as much production and stuff like that. So as you can see here, this is a production line because those systems aren't made by hand. They're usually made by another robotic system, which is why there's a couple issues right now with it. And that's pretty much it. So I'm more excited. And yeah, that's pretty much it within robotic systems.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. So now I'm going to provide some information on our next speaker, Nikkei. Nikkei is an aspiring medic currently volunteering in Health Watch Lewisham Youth Board, a charity focusing on allowing youth to have a voice in their health and social care needs. She's also a volunteer with New Generation Healthcare, a domiciliary care company that caters to the needs of old people. In her free time, she enjoys playing the trumpet and going to the gym. And with that being said, I will now hand over the floor to Nikkei for her presentation.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. So my name is Ajijola, and I'm a student at Brampton Manor Academy and an inspiring medic. So I titled this PowerPoint, The History, Evidence, and Consequences of Medical Racism. So I chose this topic because racism or racial disparities in medicine is a topic that's not widely known, spoken, or even cared about. Physicians show concern when these topics are raised, but not enough is actively being done to actually create a change, which is why I decided to research and broadcast this issue myself. So first, I'll start with the history of medical racism, which is slavery. So slavery can be seen as the root of all racial bias and injustice in today's society. However, many people, including doctors themselves, fail to understand that this bias affects medicine just as much, if not more, than other political and social institutions. So medical education was built on the exploitation and inhumane dissection of slaves. During times of slavery, slaves, especially Black women, were used as a means of experimentation. Many breakthroughs in medicine were made at the expense of Black people. The lack of respect and value for slaves at the time meant that they endured violent medical treatment during experiments. They didn't even receive the same ethical care that we give to animals when we do practicals in our biology labs, for example. So even after the emancipation of slaves, the ill treatment of Black people continued. For instance, colleges stole Black bodies from graveyards to continue to experiment and analyze them to gain more insight into the anatomy of the human body. Also, in order to justify the inhumane experimentation being done on Black people for the benefit of medical research, many scientists champion this belief, many false beliefs, such as the belief that Black people feel less pain than white people, which many doctors still believe to this day. For instance, an article written by Dr. Samuel Cartwright wrote that Black people had a Negro disease that made them insensible to pain when subjected to punishment. So it's a case where when statements like this were championed by accredited doctors, it's no surprise that racial bias in medicine was so widely apparent. Cases like this were just one of the many roots of medical racism. So now, even as recently as the 20th century, Black individuals were still victim to racial bias in the medical fields. Black patients were being stripped of their reproductive rights by doctors by being targeted for non-consensual compulsory sterilization due to early 20th century eugenic laws. So eugenics referred to a law that caused forced sterilization of less abled people. Many people were sterilized due to a mental or physical disability, but marginalized groups were also unlawfully targeted. And sterilization is an act that renders a female incapable of sexual reproduction. Forced sterilization is when this act is done without the individual's consent and/or knowledge. For instance, there were cases where Black women will go to the gynecologist for a general checkup or a pap smear, for example, then leave the clinic no longer being able to bear children without their knowledge. So eugenic laws were established once the science of inherited traits were discovered. The aims of these laws were to eliminate illnesses, disabilities, and even crime in order to advance and create a superior race. They were under the assumption that the removal of these disabilities or these people with disabilities would benefit society due to the significant reduction in cost of caring for the less abled. But this was the case until Paul Brandon Beringer, Dean of a medical school and founder of UVA's first hospital, published 3 treatises and became the spokesperson on the inferiority and biological disadvantage of Black people. But this wasn't actually the case. So in the past, Black people had a higher report of tuberculosis and syphilis, but this was due to their poor housing conditions and the lack of clean water. However, Beringer used these facts to promote the idea of genetic unfitness in Black people, labeling it the Negro problem. So with this evidence being taken out of context, Beringer was able to advocate for forced sterilization of Black people by campaigning that the Negro problem was a huge public threat to white people. So it's the fact that renowned doctors were promoting these racial attacks and false ideologies in as recently as the 20th century is one of the causes of racial biases of physicians to this day. By promoting the Negro problem as a threat to white people, both physicians and other civilians would believe that this problem was real and actually very threatening. So this meant that new people entered the medicine workforce with the belief that Black people were a hazard, which added to the already majorly racist sector. So now onto racial bias in the present day. So, as mentioned before, a common belief amongst many doctors to this day is that Black people feel less pain than their white counterparts. So I wanted to do some research myself to see if this was an actual thought and how far this belief was put into action. So I found that in a study done on 1 million children diagnosed with appendicitis, Black children were not only less likely to receive painkillers for small acute pain, but they were also less likely to receive opioids, which is the appropriate treatment for severe pain. Yeah. Even in A&E, Black patients were significantly less likely to receive analgesics for incidents such as for serious incidents like extreme fractures, despite reporting similar levels of pain as their white counterparts. For instance, only 57% of Black patients received analgesics compared to 74% of whites. So this difference in percentage is too large to consider these unequal treatments or coincidence. It's evident that there's a common belief that Black people experience less pain than other races, resulting in more painful and unpleasant clinical visits for them. Even during the pandemic, this sense of racial disparity is present. So COVID-19 is shown to disproportionately affect Black people. This graph here, it shows how much more likely each ethnicity is to die from being diagnosed from COVID than white people, which is this vertical white dotted line. And you can see that Black people, sorry, the thingy's coming, yeah. You can see that Black people are on top, being around 4 times more likely to die from COVID than white patients. So my point is with this is that we know that a lot of people with COVID may be asymptomatic, or they assume this because they're not experiencing the more common symptoms like coughing or loss of smell. But another symptom that is generally present in supposedly asymptomatic patients is something called COVID toes, which is shown as a skin rash or discoloration of toes, as you can see in these pictures here. So even though BAME people are much more likely to die from COVID, dermatological images have only been of white toes, not Black. So it's a case where including images of different races to facilitate doctors in distinguishing symptoms, it's a simple effort to establish inclusivity in medicine. But even the most minimalistic efforts are not being done. So we can't expect the care of BAME patients to improve if even the curriculum fails to educate physicians on their unique care. So it's no doubt that Black patients now depict healthcare in a bad light due to the history of racial bias that they've encountered for centuries. And there are, of course, consequences to these acts of inequity. For instance, many Black patients now refuse to participate in research studies and clinical trials due to the history and of exploitation and racial inequalities. So despite this being an expected outcome, this consequence does not hold any benefit to the future of Black patient care. Research on Black patients is a necessity in order to identify and discover the best therapies to diseases that are more prominent in Black people. Failure to obtain insight on the biology of Black people would result in an unchanged field that favors the care of white patients over Black. Unfortunately, in my belief, we can expect this trend to continue since even children are victims of this racial inequality in medicine, as I stated earlier. For instance, the not receiving appropriate treatment for procedures can result in them experiencing more pain than necessary, causing a negative connotation of medicine, and which continues the cycle of them refusing to participate in clinical trials. So a study shows that Black patients are more likely to heed and trust the advice of Black doctors. But unfortunately, as you can see by this past pie graph, there's a significant disproportionality between white patients and white doctors and any other ethnicity in healthcare, in medicine to be specific. So this orange section here shows white people, and in this small blue section here are the Black doctors in the medical field. And this graph was from 2018. So to benefit Black patients, it's important to reduce the disparity between the number of Black people to non-Black doctors by bringing more Black people into the medical workforce. So to link this sense of distrust for both doctors and clinical trials, we can look at the development of COVID vaccines. A survey conducted in England in January showed that 72% of Black participants stated that they were unlikely or very unlikely to get the jab. The clinical trials for the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines lacked Black participants. Black people made up only 10% and 8% of the clinical trials respectively. So this shortcoming is one of the statistics many people in the Black community has cited as a reason for distrust. So it's like, last week, I was walking home from the gym and there were people singing onto speakers, like they were busking as if it was a street performance kind of thing. And they were singing and on the speakers saying to people that they shouldn't take the vaccine. And then there were even groups of people handing out flyers with information as to why they shouldn't take the vaccine. So I didn't take one, but I wish I did, because now I'm kind of interested into what was actually on the flyers. But it was just really interesting to me to see this severe distrust that the Black community has for medicine and research. But the thing is like, we can't even blame them. Like, centuries of unethical research has caused this, and there has been no public attempt to bring awareness or to reduce these unconscious biases that affect the lives of Black people. I have done a presentation like this before, and many people have been shocked, even doctors themselves. But it's a case where, I'm not saying that I did this to doctors, but like when people have tried to bring this sense of racial injustice in medicine to doctors, they seem shocked themselves. But the problem is that they're just shocked, they're just concerned, they're not actively making a change they're not actively doing anything to create a change in the medical workforce to try to mitigate these disparities. But fortunately, there are establishments that have recognized these consequences of medical racism, and they're trying to implement methods to mitigate these effects. For instance, two notable recommendations from the National Medical Association includes all US medical school curricula, including a course on the healthcare of racial and ethnic biases, and every medical school designing a course to help students identify their own intrinsic racial and ethnic biases in order to sensitize them to the negative effects of the biases and to just make them aware of it. Because I'm not saying that all doctors are actively racist. Most of this is an unconscious thought. Like the idea that Black people feel less pain than white people is even something that's present in Black people themselves. So it's just a case where I believe that there needs to be courses of not even just medical students, anyone in any healthcare course, to take these courses to be able to identify these unconscious biases that they hold. So I don't know if there's an association trying to implement this in the UK as well, but there needs to be, because we need to get this idea that the UK is as bad as the US, because racism in a course as personal as medicine is very detrimental to the health of BAME people. So it's important to eradicate this, no matter how big or small the biases may be. So thank you for listening to my presentation. And I know that every youth in this Zoom call has an interest in health. So I hope that from what you've learned today, you guys all do your part to make an active effort to reduce the racial injustices in healthcare when you eventually do start working in the field. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that insightful presentation. It's really important that we do eventually one day eradicate racism in this field, because obviously it's affecting lots of people's lives. Lots of people's lives are at stake when there's an inequality to access to materials and to hospitals and different doctors and whatnot. So it's a very, very good topic, very important. Thank you, very insightful. So now I'm going to provide some information on our next speaker. Alekhya is a high school student who lives in Pittsburgh, and she's very passionate in global health. And specifically, she's more passionate about cultured meat and the impact it has on the demand for meat in general. With that being said, I will now hand the floor over to Alekhya for her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will just quickly present my screen. Okay. So as I said before, or at least what Mark said before, I really like agriculture and how that can impact the health organizations around the world. And in this presentation, I will be talking about cultured meat. So in this presentation, I will discuss what the problem is, what is the solution, and advantages and disadvantages about the solution. So the problem is the environment in which regular meat is grown is super, super unhealthy. And as we consume it, the harmful contaminants in the are entering our body and basically harming us. And the environment that the regular meat are grown are called factory farms. Factory farms were created to increase the production of the meat and decrease cost, which would result in a healthy environment where the meat is grown. And factory farms are also the main cause of animal abuse. So we've been seeing this all over the internet now. The animal abuse in makeup products has been increasing. And whenever we consume any type of meat, those are grown in factory farms and there's animal abuse in it. So they are threatened to grown faster and eat contaminants of very unhealthy foods. This factory farms also affect workers that work at the factory farms. So there's several respiratory diseases that are formed from these factory farms where the workers live in, and some of them include pneumonia and etc. So here's some more statistical information. So factory farms account for 37% of methane emissions, which is methane is has 20 times the power of increasing the global warming power than CO2 does. And these are released from factory farms whenever they are cutting the animals or having any of those harmful contaminants giving to the animals. Animals are also forced to grow up 3 times faster than their normal nature intended. So all animals in this entire planet have a certain they need to grow, but the animals in the factory farms need to grow 3 times faster to increase the production of their food. And this is also done by selective breeding and weight-gaining drugs used in food. So if there's a weak type of animal, they are going to be killed. And if there's a bigger animal or like a bigger organism, they are going to just give it food with more drugs so they can grow faster, so that animal can grow faster and then they can increase the production and then sell it faster. Okay, so what is the solution to this? So cultured meat is the solution. So cultured meat is a form of cellular agriculture in which a single vitreous cell is required to produce the same type of meat as factory farms, but a healthier, cleaner, and safer one. So the process of how to make cultured meat. So a single stem cell is chosen from an organism and that is placed in a petri dish. For this example, I'll just be using a chicken. So in the chicken, a single stem cell, a stem cell can be turned into any single cell in the entire body. So you can turn it into a fat cell, any type of cell. So that is what a stem cell is. And a stem cell is chosen from the organism and then it's placed in a petri dish. The petri dish is then filled with a liquid growth medium, which is a liquid that has no contaminants or anything. It just makes the stem cell to duplicate itself faster. And then that petri dish is then placed into a bioreactor where it is where it's placed in for about 1 week. And after that, after a couple of days or after an entire week, the meat is fully grown into an actual chicken. So this example, the stem cell of the chicken is grown into a full chicken by only taking 1 stem cell from that. And also choosing the stem cell does not harm the organism at all because it's basically like putting a needle in it and just taking one. It's not animal abuse, it's not anything, it's just taking a cell from it. Okay, so here is a cool fun fact about cultured meat. In 1932, Winston Churchill predicted that in 50 years, we shall escape the absurdity of growing a whole chicken in order to eat only one part by growing these parts separately. And this basically is talking about cultured meat. Instead of like eating an entire or like killing an entire chicken to only eat the wings or the legs or anything of that sort, we can only take the stem cell and reprogram the stem cell to grow into one part only, and then we can consume that part only and have that organism live on by itself. Okay, so some advantages of this new cultured meat thing is that there are no antibiotics involved in this process, and it is only fortified with vitamins and minerals. As I talked about, the liquid growth medium that is placed in the petri dish is only full of vitamins and minerals for that stem cell to duplicate itself, but there's no antibiotics involved into it. The fat and cholesterol of the meat is also controlled whenever it is placed into the bioreactor. There is certain heat levels and certain levels of that bioreactor which controls the fat and cholesterol, so it does not get it doesn't get too much control. It's like always controlled, basically on what I'm saying. Okay, another thing is that the emission rates are going to be estimated to decrease about 74 to 87% by using these cultured meat forms. So this is emissions rates are not only from like animal abuse or killing the animals, but also from the factory farms. If you use cultured meat and then basically completely stop using factory farms, it's going to decrease about 74 to 87%. And then also animal slaughtering and abuse will decrease significantly because we are not harming the animal at all whenever we're taking that single vitro cell or stem cell. So why is this not implemented yet? Well, here are some of the disadvantages to this. The lab-grown meat companies are experimenting with various techniques to mimic collagen, but there's no clear-cut answer yet. So collagen are structures inside an organism that help it to make the process faster, basically. So those collagens inside because it's out of, like, the stem cell is out of that organism, they don't have the collagen inside it. And the meat companies are trying to find an answer to how to make the collagen or make this process much faster. Another thing about this is the cost. So it costs $50 to create the same chicken nugget using cultured meat. Meat production costs only about $5. So if this is implemented and used more commonly, this will definitely decrease. Another thing, we're not seeing much of this in the news or anywhere around, is because the federal government have been overseeing the meat grown in the labs, but denied to have any approval of this type of meat anywhere. So that is why maybe in the future they might approve it, but it is not approved. Okay, so here's some of the resources that I used. And if you have any other questions, just email me at Buragadda21@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I personally didn't know about cultured meat, before viewing this presentation, and I think it's a cool idea, and that it's kind of crazy to think that we've come such a long way from times of Winston Churchill to just think about these possibilities, and now things like this are kind of possible. Obviously, kind of expensive, but hopefully one day it'll become a much more cost-efficient option. Thank you for your presentation. And finally, I'll be introducing our last speaker. Akua is from Crestwood, Kentucky, and she has combined interest in public health and social justice. She's currently involved in a research-based and minority-related extracurricular. And outside of her interests, she enjoys teaching, playing instruments, learning, and traveling. With that being said, I'm now going to hand over the floor to Akua for her presentation. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, my name is Akua, and I'm going to be talking about healthcare inequality, which is kind of similar to GHYO's, but it's a little bit different. Awesome. So what do you think about me is that I am 16. I live in a small town in Kentucky called Crestwood. I go to South Olin High School. I'm involved in medicine, kids, and minorities. For medicine, I do a lot of research. I volunteer in my local hospital. I'm doing an independent research on breast cancer this summer. I tutor kids from 1st grade to 6th grade. I'm involved in International Opportunity Club Interact and track at my school with minorities. I'm involved in a club called Enough is Enough, which I'm a chapter president, also in a national board as well. I'm highly involved in my church since the 6th grade. Yeah, awesome. Let's talk about healthcare inequality. So basically, healthcare inequalities are differences in health status or in the distribution of health resources between different population groups. Let's talk about the current situation and why this is a problem, how it affects global health. So every day, 16,000 children die before their 5th birthday. So children from the poorest 20% of households are nearly twice as likely to die before their 5th birthday as children in the richest 20%. 87% of the premature deaths due to non-communicable diseases occur in low and middle income countries. So these things happen mostly in third world countries, but they also happen here as well, but not as much as it does over there. Okay, so just in conclusion, just the bottom line is healthcare and poverty go hand in hand. High levels of inequality negatively affect the health of even the rich. Mainly because researchers contend inequality reduces social cohesion and dynamic that leads to more stress and fear and insecurity for everyone. Number 2, reducing health inequality is important because health is a fundamental right, and its progressive realization will eliminate inequality that results from differences in health status. Okay, let's talk about intersectional issues within healthcare, so race and gender. Number 1, Gender inequality in COVID-19. I have a quote here that says, women and girls have unique health needs, but they are less likely to have access to quality health services, essential medicines, and vaccines. Marital and reproductive health care or insurance coverage for routine and catastrophic health costs, especially in rural communities. So, for example, in Latin America, during COVID-19, Latin America and the Caribbean, an estimated 18 million additional women will lose regular access to modern birth control medicines because of the pandemic. I have a note here that says, because girls and women are less likely to have an education and are more likely to be illiterate, they may not benefit from public health messaging that is accessible, culturally, and appropriate and understandable. Awesome. Number 2, race. So the bottom line is racial and ethnical minorities receive lower quality healthcare than white people, even when insurance status, income, age, severity of conditions are comparable. In spite of significant advances in diagnosis and treatment of most chronic diseases, there is evidence that racial and ethnic minorities tend to receive lower quality of care than non-minorities, and that patients of minority ethnically experience greater mortality from various chronic diseases. Awesome. The next thing is the need for preventive health care. So preventive health care can drastically increase your lifespan because it allows you to things catch things early and treat them more easily. So for example, if you practice weight management and lose excess weight, you will increase your lifespan and prevent serious diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Okay, so here's my idea for solution for the problem. I have 2 main solutions. Number 1 is investing in education. One of the most important ways to improve health in developing countries is by educating citizens. Educating people enables them to obtain safer jobs, increase health literacy, take preventive healthcare measures, and avoid riskier health behaviors and demand better quality health services. And number 2, increasing health benefits from the poor. I have underlined the most important things in the passage, so don't get too confused with that. So poor countries receive much lower health benefits than richer countries. That's how it is so far. In developing areas, the poor are subjected to higher risk of contracting diseases and lower access to quality health care. This is solely because of the cost of medicine, treatment, and vaccinations. So my solution is to create targeted systems that strategies identify which identify who is poor and eligible for lower cost healthcare. So what I think would be the best way to solve this is just to have a system that identifies who is poor and who needs what and what they need now and how, like, is it important for them to have it now or later. Okay, so this targeting system has the potential to eliminate poverty in less than 10%, the cost of development programs that do not discriminate between poor and rich. These systems are done on different levels. So number 1, more so these systems will just identify the most specifically they target the solution is to create a system that identifies number 1, who is poor. Number 1, who is poor, who is geographically poor. Number 2, number 3, what diseases do they need now? Like, what is the most important thing you need? Number 4, the age of those that need health care the most. Okay. Yeah. The last thing is what can we do now? What can we do as citizens, as high schools? What can we do now? Number 1 is to educate, like how I'm educating you right now on healthcare inequalities. So efforts to raise the public's awareness of racial ethnic healthcare disparities have achieved most modest success. So just talking to you about this would just give you an idea of how things are right now and maybe give you an idea of what you could do in the real world. And number 2, voting. Right now, I know you guys are high schoolers right now, but when you get older, when it's time for you to vote, you should think about how the president is dealing with the problem. And I have questions here you can think about when you're voting. And number 3, more doctors. So most of you guys here want to be doctors or nurses or whatever you want to be in real life. So even when healthcare resources are geographically accessible, language and culture barriers are sometimes a problem. So I'm assuming most of you here are either a minority or have some different cultural background. So just you wanting to be a doctor, you being a doctor and you coming from wherever you are in life and just talking to somebody who's just like you and telling them and encouraging them to, like, for example, take the vaccine, they're more likely to take it than if somebody who they did not know is telling them to do so. For example, I am from a country called Ghana, and I used to live in Ghana, and my friends, if I tell them, hey guys, go do this because it's good for you, they would listen to me because one, I'm in the U.S. and I'm educated, and number two, they know me, so they trust me that I'm not gonna hurt them. I'm not gonna tell them to do something that will hurt them, like help, like affect their life. So they'll listen to me more than somebody who, like a complete stranger, telling them to do something. Okay. Yeah, and that's it. Those are my sources. And yeah. Awesome.
Okay, thank you. Very well explained, very informative. Thank you for your presentation. And I just want to once again thank everyone for their presentations. It was very insightful, very informative. Thank you guys.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, we would once again like to thank all the student speakers for their presentations today. And thank you all for attending the meeting and learning as much as you can. And please use the link posted in chat by Mark to obtain your attendance certificate. And thank you all so much for attending. And we look forward to seeing you in our next monthly meeting. And we'll stick around for a couple of minutes to make sure everyone has access to the link.